That night, I remember staring at the clock. It was 10:47 p.m. My husband, Mark, had promised he'd be home by 9. He said he had to stay late at work, again. But something in his voice had changed lately, colder, emptier. So I did something I'd never done before. I opened the Find My iPhone app. His location popped up. Not at his office in downtown Boston, but at a place I didn't recognize. A small house. A dim street. And then I zoomed in closer and I froze. Because right there, parked in front of that house, was my husband's car. And standing beside it was a woman I knew too well. My best friend, Emily. At that moment, I swear, my knees almost gave out. My name is Jean. And this is the story of how I lost everything I built with my own hands, because of the people I trusted most. For as long as I can remember, family meant everything to me. I didn't grow up with much, just a small home, a tight budget, and big dreams. But I had love. I had hope. And that was enough. When my husband passed away suddenly, I thought my world had ended. He was my best friend, my partner in everything. We had dreams, to travel when we retired, to watch our son grow, to grow old together. But life had other plans. I still remember the day I got the call. The doctor's voice was soft, trembling. "Mrs. Jean, I'm so sorry." And just like that, I became both mother and father overnight. Daniel was only 12 at the time. He looked up at me with those big brown eyes, confused and scared. That night, as we sat on the floor holding each other, I promised him something. That no matter what happened, I'd never let him feel alone. From that day on, I worked harder than I ever thought possible. I took extra shifts at school, tutored kids after hours, and still managed to make it home in time to cook Daniel's favorite dinner, spaghetti with too much cheese. We weren't rich, but we were happy. He was my reason to wake up every morning. Every report card, every soccer game, every late-night study session, I was there. Always there. When he graduated from college, I cried harder than he did. It wasn't just pride. It was relief that my years of sacrifice had meant something. Then he met Clara. She was beautiful, confident, and always dressed perfectly. The kind of woman who turned heads when she entered a room. Daniel was smitten from the moment they met. I could see it in his eyes. He'd fallen completely. At first, I was happy for him. Every mother dreams of seeing her son in love. I tried to welcome her, to be the kind of mother-in-law she could feel comfortable with. I invited her over, cooked dinner, asked about her family, her job, her dreams. But she never looked at me the same way I looked at her. Her smiles felt rehearsed, her tone too polite. Sometimes, when she thought I wasn't watching, her expression would drop, cold, distant. One evening, at dinner, she made a joke about how older people shouldn't live alone. Everyone laughed politely, but there was something sharp behind her words. Daniel didn't notice. But I did. Still, I stayed quiet. I thought maybe she just needed time. Maybe she'd soften once she knew me better. A few months later, Daniel came to me with an idea. "Mom," he said gently, "you shouldn't worry about bills anymore. You've worked hard your whole life. Why don't you let me handle things now? Let me manage your savings, your house, everything. That way you can relax." It sounded caring, thoughtful, and he was my son. The boy I'd raised, the man I trusted with my life. I didn't question him. I signed every document he brought me. He said it was just paperwork for tax purposes. That was the day I unknowingly gave away everything I owned. My home, my savings, my independence. All of it, gone. But at that time, I didn't know. I was just happy that Daniel cared enough to think of me. After the wedding, they moved into my house. They said it was temporary. I moved into a small apartment nearby so they could start their life. In the beginning, Clara still called sometimes. Invited me over once in a while? But soon those visits stopped. Then the calls became shorter. "Daniel's busy, Mom," she'd say. "We'll visit next weekend." Next weekend became next month. And eventually, nothing. I spent my days alone. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. I'd make 2 cups of tea out of habit. then end up pouring one down the sink. Sometimes I'd look through old photo albums, birthdays, Christmas mornings, Daniel's graduation. He used to look at me with so much love, so much gratitude. Now, when he did visit, his eyes carried distance. One day, I decided to surprise them. I baked Daniel's favorite pie and drove to the house. When I arrived, Clara opened the door. Her smile was stiff. "Oh, Jean," she said, almost startled. "You should have called." I looked past her. The living room looked different. My old furniture was gone. The family pictures I had on the walls, replaced. My curtains, my cushions, everything that made it home, erased. I forced a smile. "I thought I'd drop by just to see how you both are." Clara hesitated, then stepped aside. "Daniel's not home. He's at work." So I left the pie on the counter, told her to tell him I stopped by, and drove back home. But something inside me felt off. Something had changed. Days later, I got a strange message from an old neighbor. "Jean, are you moving somewhere new?" she asked. "I saw your house online. Looks like it's up for sale." My heart nearly stopped. I rushed to my laptop, opened the listing site, and there it was. My house, photos of every corner. My garden, my kitchen. Even the window where I used to sit reading every evening, listed. For sale. I thought it had to be a mistake. Maybe they were selling the house next door. But when I looked closer, I saw my family photo in the background of one picture. My photo. I called Daniel immediately. He didn't answer. I called again. Nothing. Finally, I texted him. "Daniel, what's going on? Why is my house listed for sale?" An hour later, I got his reply. "Mom, don't worry about it. We're just making some financial adjustments. Clara's handling things." Financial adjustments? He had sold the only thing I'd ever owned, and I hadn't even known. That night, I sat in silence. No tears came, just an empty ache in my chest. I thought about all the nights I stayed awake for him when he was sick. The times I skipped meals to buy him new shoes. The way I clapped louder than anyone when he got his first award. And this was how he repaid me. I looked around my small apartment, the peeling paint, the flickering bulb, the cold silence, and I realized I had given everything to a son who didn't see my worth anymore, but I wasn't going to break. I may have been alone. I may have been old, but I still had my strength, and I still had my name. If they thought they could take everything from me quietly, they were wrong. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, opened my old diary, and began writing. Every date, every transaction, every moment that led to this betrayal, because I knew one thing for sure. A storm was coming. And this time, I was the one bringing it. The days after I discovered the house listing were some of the longest of my life. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying one question. How could my own son do this to me? I tried calling Daniel again and again. Sometimes he wouldn't answer. Sometimes he'd send short replies that made my stomach twist. "Mom, please don't overthink. Clara knows what she's doing. It's all legal, don't worry." Legal? That one word felt like a knife. I started digging through my drawers, searching for the documents I'd signed. The ones Daniel said were just for taxes. When I finally found them, I sat under the yellow kitchen light and began to read. I'm not a lawyer. I didn't understand most of the words. But there was one line, one that made my heart stop. It said that I had transferred full ownership of my house to Daniel. No joint ownership, no condition. Nothing left in my name. The pen mark, my own signature, was there, staring back at me like a wound. I dropped the papers onto the table, my hands shaking. That was the moment it all sank in. Everything I had ever built, every brick, every dollar, every sacrifice, now belonged to someone else. And that someone was my son. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I sat in the dark staring out the window. The city lights blurred as tears filled my eyes. I thought of my husband. How proud he used to be of Daniel. How he used to say, "That boy will never forget what you've done for him." If only he could see what Daniel had become. The next morning, I went straight to their house. When Clara opened the door, she looked annoyed. "John again?" she said, her hand on the frame as if she didn't want to let me in. I pushed gently past her and said, "I need to talk to Daniel. Now." She folded her arms. "He's at work. Whatever this is, it can wait." I held up the papers. "Did you know about this? Did you know he transferred the house into his name without telling me?" For a moment, she didn't speak. Then she smirked slightly, not with surprise, but with something colder. "Jean," she said, "Daniel told you everything. You signed it yourself." I felt my chest tighten. "He told me it was for taxes, Clara, not to take my home." Her smile grew sharper. "Well, maybe you should have read it carefully. It's not our fault you didn't." Those words, that tone, the sheer cruelty in them. I took a step back. "You planned this." Clara tilted her head slightly, her voice calm and cutting. "We didn't plan anything. We just moved forward. You've had your time, Jean. Let us build our future now." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I had treated her like a daughter, welcomed her, defended her, tried to love her. And this was how she saw me. A burden, an obstacle. A burden, an obstacle. As I stood there, Daniel's car pulled into the driveway. My heart leapt with a strange mix of hope and fear. He got out, looked at us, and sighed. "Mom, what's going on now?" "Daniel," I said softly, holding up the documents. "You took my house. You lied to me." He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling heavily. "Mom, please. We've talked about this. You said you trusted me." "I trusted you because you're my son," I said, my voice trembling. "Not because I wanted to be fooled." He frowned, glancing at Clara, then back at me. "It's just a house. You've got your apartment. Why are you making it such a big deal? Just a house." Those 3 words cut deeper than anything else. I whispered, "It's not just a house, Daniel. It's my life. It's your father's memory. It's where you grew up." But he didn't meet my eyes. Instead, he turned away, his voice sharp. "I can't do this right now. Clara and I have a lot going on." And then he walked inside, leaving me standing there on the porch. I could still hear their voices behind the door, muffled but tense. Clara's was firm, Daniel's tired. But I couldn't make out the words. The only sound I really heard was the quiet click of the lock. They locked me out. I drove home in silence. My fingers gripped the steering wheel so tightly they turned white. I didn't even cry that night. I just sat in the dark, staring at the papers on my kitchen table, every moment from the past replayed in my mind. The laughter, the holidays, the nights I stayed up helping him study, the mornings I left early for work just to keep our home running. All for what? So that one day, I could be shut out by my own child? The next few weeks were a blur. I tried to reach him again, left messages, letters, even went to his office once. The receptionist said he was busy. It was like I didn't exist anymore. Then one afternoon, I saw a moving truck outside my old house. I parked down the street and watched from the car. New people were walking in, smiling, laughing, carrying boxes into what used to be my home. I saw Clara standing outside, talking to one of them. She handed over a key. That was it. It was done. They had sold it. And I realized something that day. No amount of begging, no amount of tears was going to bring back what I'd lost. That house wasn't just gone. My son was gone too. But that pain, that betrayal, began to change something inside me. For weeks, I avoided people. I didn't tell anyone what happened. I was too ashamed. I felt stupid, used, and completely alone. But one evening, as I sat watching the sunset through my small window, I heard my husband's words echo in my head again. "Jean, you're stronger than you think." I took a deep breath. Maybe he was right. Maybe it was time I stopped crying over what they took and started thinking about what I still had. I still had my mind. My memory. My proof. I pulled out a notebook and started writing again. Not just dates this time, but everything I remembered. Every conversation, every signature, every lie. And as I wrote, a strange calm came over me. For the first time in months, I didn't feel weak. I felt something else. Determined. If Daniel and Clara thought I was just an old woman they could trick and discard, they were about to learn just how wrong they were, because I wasn't going to stay silent anymore. I wasn't going to be the victim. I was going to make them face what they had done, and make sure everyone else saw who they really were. That was the night I decided. I would get my life back, no matter what it took. After weeks of crying and sleepless nights, something inside me changed. The sadness started to fade, and in its place came silence, the kind that burns from the inside. I wasn't going to beg anymore. I wasn't going to wait for an apology that would never come. If Daniel and Clara thought they could steal my home and walk away smiling, they were about to see a side of me they'd never imagined. But I had to be smart. If I wanted to fight back, I couldn't just react with anger. I had to plan. I started by gathering everything, every document, every message, every bank slip I had. I spent hours digging through old folders, scanning papers, highlighting dates. My kitchen table turned into a war room. Then I visited an old colleague of mine, someone I trusted deeply, Mark. He used to be a lawyer before retiring. When I told him everything, he went silent for a long time. Finally, he said, "Jean, what they did is morally disgusting. But legally, it might be hard to undo. You signed the documents." I nodded slowly. "I know. But there has to be something. Some way to make them face what they did." Mark leaned back, thinking. "You may not get the house back," he said, "but you can make sure everyone knows the truth. And if any part of that transfer involved manipulation or deception, that's where you start." Those words stuck in my mind. That's where you start. I left his house that evening with a small flame of hope in my chest. The next day, I went to the county records office. I wanted copies of every legal document Daniel had filed. When I read through them, one line stood out. Joint asset reassignment with full consent. Joint asset? That meant Clara had been part of it. She had co-signed, so she wasn't just aware, she was in it from the start. I felt my pulse quicken. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a setup, and I knew exactly what kind of people I was dealing with. People obsessed with money. People who cared more about appearances than truth. So I decided to hit them where it hurt, their image. I started small. I reached out to old friends, neighbors, and family friends who had known Daniel growing up. I told them parts of the story, carefully, calmly, truthfully. At first, no one believed me. "Jean, are you sure? Daniel's always been such a good man." I didn't argue. I just showed them the documents. My signature, the transfer date, the listing of the house. One by one, their expressions changed. From disbelief to pity to anger. Soon, whispers began to spread. At church, at the grocery store, at Daniel's workplace, and Clara, who loved attention, started noticing the shift. Her social media, once full of smiling photos, became quiet. The likes and comments disappeared. That's when I made my next move. I sent an anonymous message to Daniel's employer, a polite, factual note explaining how he had used deceptive paperwork to take advantage of his own mother's property. I didn't accuse him of a crime. I simply told the truth. A week later, Daniel called me for the first time in months. His voice was tense. "Mom, what are you doing?" I stayed calm. "I'm just telling people what happened, Daniel." "Why? Are you ashamed of it?" He paused, his tone rising. "You're ruining my reputation." I let out a small, tired laugh. "You ruined it yourself the day you lied to me." He hung up. That night, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. But I wasn't done yet. I decided to go further. I contacted a local journalist, a woman named Hannah who often covered community stories about seniors being scammed or manipulated. I told her everything, sent her proof, and asked her one question. What if this story isn't about a stranger, but about a son? She was silent for a long moment, then said, "Jean, this story deserves to be told." 2 weeks later, an article appeared online. Elderly woman deceived by her own son in property transfer, a heartbreaking betrayal of trust. It spread faster than I expected. People shared it, commented, offered support. The comment section was full of words like monsters. How could they? Poor mother. I didn't take joy in it. Not exactly. But I did feel something like justice. Then came the moment I didn't expect. One morning, Clara showed up at my apartment. Her perfect smile was gone. Her eyes were tired and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. "Jean," she said, her voice trembling. "We need to talk." I opened the door, arms crossed. "I think we said everything that needed to be said months ago." "Please," she whispered. "You've destroyed Daniel's job. He's been suspended. People are calling us names. We can't even walk into the grocery store." I looked at her and said softly, "Now you know what it feels like to lose everything." Her eyes filled with tears. "We never meant for it to go this far." I tilted my head. "You took my home, Clara. How far did you think it would go?" For the first time, she didn't answer. She just stood there, small, broken, and silent. I closed the door gently, without another word. That night, I sat by the window, staring at the lights outside. The city felt different now, calmer. I had taken back my voice, my strength. But there was one last thing I needed to do. I found an old photo of Daniel as a child, the one where he was holding his father's hand in front of our old house. Both of them smiling, happy, unaware of what the future would bring. I looked at it for a long time, then placed it inside an envelope with a short note. It said, "You can rebuild your name, Daniel. But you'll never rebuild my trust." I mailed it the next morning. From that day forward, I didn't look back. No calls. No messages. No guilt. I focused on myself, started volunteering again, teaching small classes for retired teachers, helping kids after school. Every morning felt lighter. Every breath freer, because revenge isn't about hurting back. It's about taking back the power they stole from you, and I finally had mine again. Weeks turned into months, and my life slowly began to find rhythm again. I had stopped expecting Daniel's calls, stopped checking my phone. But deep down, the story wasn't over. Justice may have been served in the eyes of strangers, but as a mother, my heart still carried one unanswered question. Why? Why did my son, the boy I loved more than anything, turn into a stranger who could betray me so easily? One evening, as I was closing the curtains, I noticed a familiar car parked outside my building. It was Daniel's. For a few seconds, I froze. Part of me wanted to shut the lights and pretend I wasn't home. But another part, the stronger one, whispered, "Face him." I opened the door before he even knocked. He looked different, older, tired, defeated. His eyes were hollow, and the confidence I once saw in him was gone. "Mom," he said quietly, "can we talk?" I nodded slowly. "Come in." He stepped inside, glancing around my small apartment. The plain furniture, the warm light, the quiet. It was a far cry from the big, expensive home he and Clara had built for themselves. We sat at the table, the same way we used to when he was little, eating soup together on cold winter nights. Only this time, there was no warmth between us. He took a deep breath. "Mom, everything fell apart. I lost my job." Clara left. I looked at him carefully. "She left you?" He nodded, his voice cracking. "She said she couldn't handle the pressure anymore. People looked at us differently. She blamed me for everything." I stayed silent. He continued. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I just thought I was doing the right thing. Clara said it would help us financially. She said you'd understand." I clenched my hands under the table. "Understand what, Daniel? That you took away everything I built? That you sold the house your father worked for? That you looked your own mother in the eye and lied?" He lowered his head, tears forming. I know I ruined everything." For a moment, the room was silent except for the sound of his shaking breath. Then he said, "When the story came out, Mom, people at work treated me like a criminal. I couldn't show my face anywhere, and I deserved it. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. I looked at him for a long time. And for the first time, I didn't see my son the way I used to. Not as the boy I raised, but as the man who made his own choices. Sorry doesn't give back what you took, Daniel, I said softly. Sorry doesn't erase the nights I spent crying, or the trust you broke. He nodded slowly, wiping his eyes. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted to see you, to tell you that I've lost everything. And I know it's my fault. I took a deep breath, steadying my voice. You didn't just lose your job, Daniel. You lost something much greater, my respect. His eyes lifted, glistening with regret. Mom, I don't know how to live with that. I leaned forward slightly. Then start by living honestly. Stop running from the truth. Face what you did. Maybe one day you'll learn what integrity really means. He swallowed hard, then nodded. You always said honesty was the only thing a person truly owns. I smiled faintly. I did. But I also said that once you lose it, it's the hardest thing to earn back. He stared down at his hands, rough, trembling, empty. After a long silence, he whispered, I miss you, Mom. For a moment, I wanted to reach out, to touch his hand, to say everything would be okay. But I couldn't, not yet. Some wounds need time to heal, and some maybe never do. I miss the person you used to be, I said gently. But I don't know if that person still exists, he nodded, tears streaming down. I'm trying to find him again. I stood up slowly and walked toward the window. The evening light poured into the room, soft and golden, almost forgiving. I turned back to him and said, Then I hope you do, Daniel. Because I already forgave the boy you were. But the man you became? That's up to you to fix. He stood too, unsure whether to hug me or leave. I didn't move. After a moment, he whispered, Thank you for listening, and walked out. When the door closed, I sat down, my heart pounding. The silence that followed was heavy, but it wasn't painful anymore. It was peaceful. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. Later that week, I received a letter in the mail. No name, just handwriting I recognized instantly. Daniel's inside was a check, the entire amount from the sale of the house. Along with a short note, This belongs to you, Mom. I can't buy back what I destroyed, but I can return what's yours. I'm moving away for a while. I need to start over. Thank you for teaching me the hardest lesson of my life. I held that letter for a long time. Tears fell, but this time, they weren't from pain. They were from closure. I didn't cash the check. I didn't need the money anymore. What I needed, what I finally had, was peace. That night, I went for a walk. The air was cool, the sky wide and open. As I walked past my old neighborhood, I saw the house, freshly painted, new flowers planted, children playing in the yard. It wasn't mine anymore. But it was alive again, and somehow that made me smile, I whispered quietly. Goodbye. As I walked back home, I thought about how betrayal had once broken me, but now, it had shaped me into someone stronger. People think revenge is about destroying others, but real revenge is when you rebuild yourself so completely that no one can ever break you again. That night, I lit a candle beside my husband's photo. I smiled softly and said, We did it, love. We survived it all, and for the first time in years, I slept peacefully, knowing I had faced the worst and come out whole. It's strange how time changes everything, not just the people around us, but the person inside us too. Months have passed since Daniel came to see me. At first, I expected him to call again, to visit, to ask if I'd finally forgiven him, but he didn't, and maybe that's exactly how it needed to be. Because forgiveness isn't about returning to the past. It's about freeing yourself from it. I began spending my days in quiet ways, watering my plants, teaching part-time at a local library, helping children learn to read. I'd sit with them, guiding their tiny fingers over the words, and smile when their eyes lit up in understanding. That simple joy, watching someone learn, watching someone grow, reminded me of the beauty in starting over. One afternoon, As I was closing the library, a familiar face appeared at the door. It was Daniel's old friend, Michael. He looked surprised to see me. "Gian? I wasn't sure if it was you." I smiled softly. "It's been a while." He nodded. "Daniel's doing better, you know. He found work in another city. He's different now." "Different?" I asked. "Yeah, humble, focused. He talks about you sometimes, says he's still trying to be the kind of man you can be proud of." I didn't say anything for a moment. I just smiled faintly and said, "That's good to hear." After he left, I sat by the window of the empty library, the golden light spilling across the pages of open books. And for the first time in years, my heart felt light. I whispered quietly, "You're finding your way, Daniel." That's all I ever wanted. Later that evening, as I walked home, I passed a group of young mothers at a park, laughing, playing with their kids. For a brief moment, I saw myself among them decades ago, holding Daniel's tiny hands, helping him take his first steps. I remembered how his laughter filled our little home, how proud his father was the day he said his first word. So many memories, so much love, and though things had changed, one truth remained. No matter what he did, he would always be my son. When I reached home, I made tea and sat on the balcony, watching the sun dip behind the trees. The sky turned shades of orange and gold, like it was painting its own kind of goodbye. And as I sat there, a thought came to me. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't destruction. It's dignity. It's moving forward without anger, without hate. It's smiling again when they thought you never could, because life doesn't stop when someone betrays you. It begins again, differently, quietly, beautifully. I looked at the letter Daniel had sent months ago. I still hadn't thrown it away, not because I needed it, but because it reminded me of something deeper. That even broken things can find their way back to light. I picked up my journal, the one I had started writing in after losing everything, and opened to a blank page. On the top, I wrote one sentence: "Pain may change who you are, but it also reveals who you were meant to be." I sat quietly for a long time, letting those words sink in. Every chapter of my life, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the revenge, the silence, had led me to this moment of peace. And I realized something profound. We don't always get the apologies we deserve. We don't always get the closure we crave, but we can still choose to close the door ourselves, gently, firmly, with grace. That night, I cooked dinner for myself, a simple meal, the kind my husband used to love. As I ate, I felt him with me somehow, not as a memory but as a quiet presence that said, "You did the right thing." Afterward, I walked to my dresser and took out an old photo of Daniel as a child, smiling wide, holding a paper airplane. I traced his little face with my finger and whispered, "Be happy, my son. Wherever you are." Then I placed the photo back in its frame, turned off the lights, and stood by the window. The moon was high, the air still. I smiled softly, not out of victory, but peace. Because I had learned something powerful. Revenge might bring satisfaction, but forgiveness brings freedom. And freedom is the real ending to every story. They say when someone betrays you, you have two choices: to let it break you or to let it build you. I chose to build. I chose to rebuild my peace, my life, and my heart. Brick by brick. Truth by truth. So if you've ever been betrayed, if you've ever been left broken, remember this. You are not defined by what they did to you. You are defined by how you rise after it. Because in the end, the sweetest revenge is simply living well. This was Jean's Stories, and if my story touched your heart today, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Because somewhere out there, someone needs to hear that healing is possible, and strength is born from the quietest kinds of pain.